The morning light slipped quietly through the thin curtains of Veronica's small apartment, painting soft lines across the floor. She stood in front of the mirror, adjusting the loose fabric of her dress, trying to smooth the wrinkles with careful hands. The reflection staring back at her was familiar yet heavy with doubt. Her body was fuller than most women she saw in magazines or on television. Her cheeks were round, her waist soft, her arms thicker than the elegant silhouettes she often compared herself to. But what troubled her the most was not the shape of her body. It was the memory of the words she heard almost every day. Words that cut deeper than any blade. "Veronica, do you really think that dress fits you?" The voice echoed in her mind, even though Lucio had spoken it the night before. She lowered her gaze and sighed quietly. 4 years, she had tried to convince herself that those words didn't matter. That Lucio's temper was just part of his personality. That perhaps, if she remained patient enough, loving enough, forgiving enough, things would eventually change. But the truth she never dared to admit was simple. Lucio never stopped humiliating her. The kitchen smelled faintly of coffee as Veronica prepared breakfast. She placed 2 cups on the table, along with toast and scrambled eggs. Lucio liked his breakfast simple, but everything had to be perfectly arranged. A moment later, the bedroom door opened. Lucio stepped out wearing a crisp white shirt and expensive trousers. His hair was neatly styled, and the confidence in his posture made him look like a man who believed the world belonged to him. He barely glanced at Veronica. Instead, he checked his reflection in the glass of the window. "You should really start waking up earlier," he said coldly. "The eggs are already getting cold." Veronica forced a small smile. "I just finished cooking them," she replied softly. Lucio sat down, took a bite and frowned. "Too much salt." He pushed the plate slightly away from him as if the food had personally offended him. Veronica lowered her eyes again. "I'm sorry," she murmured. Lucio leaned back in his chair, studying her from head to toe with an expression that made Veronica's stomach tighten. "You know," he said casually, "I saw Clara yesterday." Veronica's hands froze on the table. Clara, Lucio's co-worker. Tall, slim, beautiful. Lucio continued speaking as if discussing the weather. "She's been going to the gym lately. You should see her now. She looks incredible." Veronica felt her chest tighten, but she kept her voice calm. "That's good for her." Lucio chuckled. "Good for her? Veronica, you should take notes. Women like Clara actually care about how they look." His eyes moved over Veronica's body again. "You, on the other hand..." He didn't finish the sentence. He didn't need to. Silence filled the room like thick smoke. Veronica slowly cleared the table while Lucio scrolled through his phone, already bored with the conversation. This was how most mornings went. Small comments, small insults, small wounds that never had time to heal. And yet Veronica stayed, not because she enjoyed the pain, but because she still believed in something fragile and foolish. Hope. The city outside was already alive when Veronica stepped onto the sidewalk. People hurried past her, absorbed in their own lives. She walked carefully, holding her bag close to her chest. At the bakery where she worked, the air smelled of warm bread and sugar. The owner, Mrs. Elena, greeted her with a warm smile. "Good morning, Veronica." "Good morning, Mrs. Elena." Veronica tied on her apron and began arranging pastries in the display case. This small shop was the only place where she felt somewhat safe from judgment. But even here, whispers sometimes followed her. 2 young women entered the bakery later that morning. They glanced at Veronica briefly before leaning close to each other. One of them whispered something. The other laughed quietly. Veronica pretended not to notice. She had learned long ago that reacting only made things worse. Still, the laughter lingered in her ears long after they left. By afternoon, the sky outside had turned pale gray. Veronica returned home tired but hopeful that the evening would be peaceful. Instead, she found Lucio in the living room, speaking on the phone. "Yes, tonight's party will be big," he was saying. All the partners will be there. He noticed Veronica and gestured for her to stay quiet. After ending the call, he looked at her. You're coming with me tonight. Veronica blinked in surprise. I am. Yes, Lucio said. It's an important event. I need a wife beside me. For a moment, a small spark of happiness warmed Veronica's chest. Lucio rarely invited her to social events. Thank you, she said gently. Lucio stood up and walked toward the closet. Don't thank me yet, he replied. He pulled out a dark blue dress and handed it to her. You'll wear this. Veronica looked at the dress. It was beautiful but far too small. Lucio, she said quietly, I'm not sure it will fit. Lucio rolled his eyes. Of course it doesn't fit. That's the problem. He crossed his arms. Veronica, tonight there will be important people there. Investors, business partners, beautiful women who actually take care of themselves. His voice turned sharp. You can't show up looking like this. The word hung in the air like poison. Veronica swallowed. I'll try my best, she whispered. Lucio shook his head. Sometimes I wonder how I ended up with you. The sentence landed like a stone in Veronica's chest. But she didn't cry. She had learned not to cry in front of him. Instead, she carried the dress to the bedroom and closed the door quietly behind her. The mirror reflected the same woman as before. Round cheeks, soft body, tired eyes. Veronica held the dress against herself and stared at her reflection. For a long moment, she said nothing. Then, almost in a whisper, she spoke. I'll try harder. Outside the bedroom, Lucio poured himself a drink, completely unaware that every word he spoke carved deeper scars into the heart of the woman who loved him. To Lucio, Veronica was nothing more than an inconvenience. A wife he could tolerate, a shadow beside him. But what he didn't realize, what no one realized yet, was that even the most patient hearts had limits. And sometimes, humiliation could become the very thing that changed a life forever. For now, however, Veronica was still the woman everyone mocked. Still the wife who endured every cruel word. Still the woman who believed that love, no matter how painful, was worth fighting for. She didn't know it yet, but the world that humiliated her today would soon witness a version of Veronica they had never imagined. That evening, the sky outside the city was painted in deep shades of gold and purple as the sun slowly disappeared behind the tall buildings. Veronica stood quietly in front of the mirror again, wearing the dark blue dress Lucio had given her earlier. It had taken nearly an hour for her to make it fit. She had pulled the fabric carefully, adjusting the seams and tightening the waist with trembling hands. The dress still felt slightly uncomfortable, pressing against her body in ways that made her self-conscious. But she tried to smile. Tonight was important for Lucio. If she could just stand beside him with dignity, maybe, just maybe, he would finally be proud of her. From the living room, Lucio's impatient voice echoed. Veronica, are you ready yet? I'm coming, she answered quickly. When she stepped out of the bedroom, Lucio was already dressed in an elegant black suit, adjusting the cuffs of his shirt while looking at himself in the mirror near the door. He glanced at Veronica. For a moment, his expression showed mild surprise. But the moment passed quickly. You took long enough, he said. Veronica clasped her hands nervously. Do I look okay? Lucio studied her for a second before shrugging. You look acceptable. The word was not warm, but it was the closest thing to approval Veronica had received from him in weeks. They left the apartment shortly after. Lucio's black luxury car moved smoothly through the evening traffic as the city lights began to glow. Veronica sat quietly in the passenger seat, watching the reflections of streetlights pass across the window. Her heart beat faster with every mile. She had never attended a party like this before. Lucio had always said she didn't belong in his professional world. But tonight was different. Tonight she was going with him. The venue appeared in the distance, a luxurious hotel glowing with golden lights. Expensive cars filled the entrance while elegantly dressed guests stepped onto the red carpet. Veronica felt suddenly small. Lucio parked the car and stepped out confidently. "Stay close," he said without looking at her. Veronica nodded. Inside, the ballroom was breathtaking. Crystal chandeliers sparkled above the crowd. Soft music filled the air, while waiters moved gracefully between groups of laughing guests holding glasses of champagne. Men in tailored suits discussed business deals. Women in elegant gowns stood beside them like living works of art. Veronica could feel eyes glancing at her the moment she entered. Not welcoming eyes, curious eyes, judging eyes. Lucio walked ahead of her, greeting colleagues with confident handshakes. "Lucio!" one man called out. "Good to see you." Lucio laughed warmly, his personality suddenly changing into the charming version he showed the world. "Good to see you too." For a moment, Veronica felt hopeful. Maybe this night would go well. Maybe Lucio would introduce her proudly. Maybe she would finally feel like his wife. But that hope lasted only a few minutes. Lucio suddenly stopped walking near the center of the ballroom. "Wait here," he told her. Veronica blinked. "Here?" "Yes." "Where are you going?" Lucio checked his watch. "I'm expecting someone." Before Veronica could ask anything else, Lucio walked away into the crowd. She stood alone near one of the tall marble columns, holding her small purse tightly. People continued to arrive. Laughter filled the room. Music played softly, and Veronica waited. Minutes passed, then 20 minutes, then 30. The crowd grew larger. Groups of guests passed by her, occasionally glancing in her direction. Two women standing nearby whispered to each other. "Is she with someone?" one of them asked quietly. The other woman shrugged. "I don't know, but she looks lost." A soft laugh followed. Veronica pretended not to hear. Her eyes searched the crowd for Lucio, and then she saw him. At the grand entrance of the ballroom, Lucio had returned. But he was not alone. Standing beside him was a tall woman with long, flowing hair and a stunning red dress that hugged her slim figure perfectly. Her makeup was flawless, her posture elegant, her smile confident. Lucio held her arm as they walked inside together. The room seemed to pause. Several guests turned to admire the glamorous pair. Veronica's breath stopped. Lucio was laughing, leaning slightly toward the woman as if sharing a private joke. They looked perfect together. Beautiful, elegant, powerful, like a couple from the cover of a luxury magazine. Veronica felt the world tilt beneath her feet. Lucio noticed her a moment later. For a brief second, their eyes met across the ballroom. But instead of embarrassment, Lucio simply smiled casually and continued walking. Straight past her, as if she were invisible. One of Lucio's colleagues approached him. "Lucio, who is this beautiful lady?" Lucio placed his hand gently on the woman's back. "This," he said proudly, "is Clara." The same Clara he had mentioned at breakfast. The same Clara he had compared Veronica to. Clara smiled sweetly. "Nice to meet you," she said. Another guest asked jokingly, "Where's your wife tonight, Lucio?" Lucio chuckled. "Oh, she's around somewhere." Laughter erupted around the group. Veronica felt heat rise to her face. Her chest tightened painfully. She stood only a few meters away from them. And yet, to Lucio she didn't exist. More whispers began spreading through the room. "Is that his wife over there? Seriously, she doesn't look like she belongs here. I heard Lucio married her years ago. But look at Clara." Veronica felt every word like a needle against her skin. Her vision blurred. She suddenly realized something terrible. Lucio had never intended to bring her here as his partner. He had brought her here as proof. Proof of how much better Clara looked. Proof of how far above Veronica he believed he had risen. The humiliation was complete. Veronica could no longer breathe comfortably inside that room. Her legs moved before she could think. She walked quickly toward the exit. No one stopped her. No one noticed. Outside the hotel, The cool night air hit her face. The distant sounds of laughter and music echoed behind the glass doors. Veronica stood on the empty sidewalk, trembling. For the first time that night, tears finally escaped her eyes. Not loud sobs, not dramatic cries, just quiet tears sliding down her cheeks. She looked down at the dress she had struggled to wear, the dress she believed might make Lucio proud. Her hands clenched. A painful truth finally settled inside her heart. Lucio had never been ashamed of her body. He had been ashamed of her existence. Veronica wiped her tears slowly. Then she turned away from the glowing hotel. Step by step, she walked down the dark street. Behind her, the luxurious party continued as if nothing had happened. Inside the ballroom, Lucio laughed with his guests. Clara remained on his arm, and the woman they had all mocked quietly disappeared into the night. No one knew where she went. No one tried to find her. By the next morning, Veronica was gone. Her phone was turned off. Her apartment was empty. And the woman who had endured years of humiliation had vanished from Lucio's life without a single word. 3 months would pass before anyone saw Veronica again. And when she finally returned, she would no longer be the woman everyone mocked. That was the last thought echoing in Veronica's mind as the bus carried her away from the glowing city that night. The lights of a luxurious hotel slowly disappeared behind her, fading into the darkness of the road. She did not look back. Her small suitcase rested beside her feet. Inside were only a few clothes, some savings she had quietly set aside over the years, and the silent determination forming deep within her chest. For the first time in a long time, Veronica was completely alone. And strangely, that loneliness felt lighter than the life she had left behind. The bus traveled through the quiet hours of the night until the sky slowly turned pale with dawn. Veronica watched the morning light appear through the window, her eyes tired but clear. For years, she had lived inside someone else's judgment, inside Lucio's cruel words, inside strangers' whispers. But now there was no one beside her to criticize how she looked, no one to laugh, no one to compare her to another woman. Just silence. And within that silence, Veronica began to hear something she had almost forgotten. Her own voice. The small coastal city she arrived in was peaceful and unfamiliar. It was far enough from Lucio's world that no one recognized her name, her past, or the humiliation she carried. To the people there, she was simply another newcomer. That anonymity felt like freedom. Veronica rented a small room above a quiet cafe near the harbor. The place was simple, with wooden floors and large windows that overlooked the sea. Every morning, she woke up to the sound of waves. At first, the days felt slow and uncertain. Veronica spent hours walking along the coastline, thinking about the life she had lived and the woman she had become. The memories of Lucio's insults still lingered, but now they felt different. They were no longer chains holding her down. They were reminders of what she would never allow again. One morning, while sitting at a small cafe table overlooking the ocean, Veronica noticed her reflection in the glass window. Her face looked tired. Her eyes carried the weight of many painful years. But something had changed. The sadness that once filled her gaze had been replaced with quiet determination. That was the day Veronica made a decision. She would rebuild herself. Not for Lucio, not for anyone else, but for herself. The transformation did not happen overnight. The first step was the hardest. Veronica joined a small fitness center near the harbor. Walking into the gym for the first time made her heart race with anxiety. Old fears returned immediately. What if people stared? What if they laughed? But no one did. The trainer greeted her kindly. "Welcome," he said with a friendly smile. "First time." Veronica nodded nervously. "Yes. Everyone starts somewhere." The simple sentence stayed with her. Everyone starts somewhere. So Veronica started. The workouts were difficult at first. Her muscles ached. Her breathing felt heavy, and her body struggled to keep up with the exercises. But every day she returned. Every day she tried again. Slowly, her strength grew. Her posture changed. Her body began responding to the care she had never given it before. But the greatest transformation was happening inside her mind. For the first time in her life, Veronica stopped seeing herself through Lucio's cruel perspective. She stopped asking whether she was beautiful enough. Instead, she asked something much more important. Was she becoming the person she wanted to be? Weeks passed, then months. Her body grew healthier and stronger. Her confidence slowly returned. But the most unexpected change in her life arrived on an ordinary afternoon. Veronica had begun working part-time at the same seaside cafe where she had once sat quietly watching the ocean. The job was simple, serving coffee, cleaning tables, and greeting customers. One afternoon, the cafe door opened, and a tall man walked inside. He looked slightly out of place in the quiet coastal town. His clothes were elegant but understated, his posture confident yet relaxed. Dark hair framed his calm face, and his eyes held a quiet intelligence. He took a seat near the window. Veronica approached with her usual polite smile. "Good afternoon," she said. "What would you like to order?" The man looked up. For a brief moment, his expression paused, not in judgment, but in curiosity. "Just a black coffee, please." Veronica nodded. When she returned with the cup, he thanked her politely. But instead of leaving immediately after finishing his drink, he remained seated, occasionally looking out toward the ocean. After a while, he spoke again. "This place is peaceful." Veronica glanced toward the sea. "Yes, that's why many people come here." He studied the horizon for a moment before asking quietly, "Do you like working here?" The question surprised her. "Yes," she answered honestly. "It helped me start over." The man's eyes returned to her face. "Starting over takes courage." Veronica smiled slightly. "I suppose it does." He extended his hand politely. "My name is Adrian." Veronica hesitated briefly before shaking his hand. "Veronica." Over the next few weeks, Adrian returned to the cafe several times. Their conversations were never long or dramatic. They spoke about simple things, the ocean, books, the peacefulness of the town. But something about Adrian felt different. He never stared at Veronica with judgment. He never made comments about her appearance. Instead, he listened. One afternoon, Adrian finally revealed something unexpected. "I've been thinking about buying property here," he said casually. Veronica raised an eyebrow. "You don't sound like someone who belongs in a small coastal town." Adrian laughed softly. "You're probably right." He paused before continuing. "I run several companies in the city. Real estate, technology, investments." Veronica blinked. "You're a businessman?" Adrian shrugged. "Some people call it that." Later that evening, Veronica searched his name online. What she found shocked her. Adrian wasn't just successful. He was one of the youngest billionaires in the country. The discovery made her nervous the next time he entered the cafe. But Adrian behaved exactly the same as before. Calm, respectful, interested in conversation. Over time, he began noticing Veronica's quiet determination, her sincerity, and the strength hidden beneath her gentle personality. One evening, as the sun set over the ocean, Adrian watched Veronica locking the cafe door after closing. "You've changed since the first day I met you," he said. Veronica looked confused. "Changed?" "Yes." He smiled thoughtfully. "The first day, you looked like someone running away from something. And now you look like someone walking toward something." Veronica felt warmth rise to her cheeks. 3 months had passed since the night she left Lucio's party. 3 months since she disappeared from the world that once humiliated her. Her body was healthier, her confidence stronger, her smile genuine. But more importantly, she had learned something that no one had ever taught her before. Her worth was never defined by someone else's cruelty. And somewhere far away, In the glittering world of luxury parties and shallow admiration, Lucio still believed Veronica had vanished in shame. He had no idea that the woman he once mocked was becoming someone entirely new, someone stronger, someone radiant, someone who would soon return to a world that once laughed at her. And when that day came, no one would recognize the woman standing before them, especially Lucio. 3 months had passed since the night Veronica disappeared from his life. For Lucio, those months had moved forward like any other season. Business meetings, luxury dinners, and endless social events filled his calendar. His life remained polished and comfortable on the surface, surrounded by the same wealthy circles that admired success more than sincerity. And yet, sometimes, late at night when the parties ended and the lights dimmed, Lucio noticed something strange. Silence. The apartment felt different without Veronica. Not peaceful, just empty. He never admitted it to anyone, not even to himself, but occasionally the memory of that night at the hotel returned to him. The image of Veronica standing quietly near the column before disappearing into the night lingered longer than he expected. But Lucio quickly pushed those thoughts away. After all, Veronica had always been fragile, weak, sensitive. She probably ran away because she couldn't handle reality. That was the story he told himself, and the story everyone else believed. So life continued, until the night everything changed. It was another elegant event hosted by one of Lucio's business partners. The venue this time was even more luxurious than the last, an exclusive rooftop ballroom overlooking the city skyline. Golden lights reflected across the glass walls, and the entire room shimmered with wealth and elegance. Lucio arrived early. Clara was supposed to meet him there later, but she had sent a message saying she would be late. Lucio didn't mind. Events like this were always predictable. The same conversations, the same compliments, the same admiration. He greeted familiar faces as he stepped into the ballroom. Lucio, good to see you again. Lucio, congratulations on the new project. You're becoming unstoppable. Lucio smiled confidently, shaking hands and accepting praise like a man accustomed to attention. Music played softly in the background while guests mingled with glasses of champagne. Everything felt ordinary, until the doors opened. At first, no one paid much attention. Guests continued talking. Waiters passed with trays of drinks, and laughter echoed across the room. Then someone near the entrance suddenly stopped speaking. Another person turned their head, and then another. Within seconds, the entire atmosphere shifted. The quiet ripple of attention spread across the ballroom like a wave. Lucio noticed the sudden change in the room. "What's going on?" he asked one of his colleagues. The man didn't answer. He was staring toward the entrance. Lucio turned around, and for the first time in his life, Lucio was speechless. Standing at the entrance of the ballroom was a woman unlike anyone else in the room. She wore a deep emerald evening gown that flowed gracefully with every step she took. The dress highlighted her elegant figure perfectly, neither excessive nor provocative, just effortlessly stunning. Her posture was confident, her walk calm and graceful. Her hair fell softly over her shoulders, shining under the golden lights of a chandelier. But it was her face that held everyone's attention. Radiant, elegant, composed. A quiet confidence surrounded her like invisible armor. Lucio felt his chest tighten. Something about the woman felt strangely familiar. But his mind refused to accept the truth, because the woman entering the ballroom looked nothing like the Veronica he remembered. And yet, it was her, Veronica. 3 months ago, she had stood in the same world as a woman people whispered about. Now, every person in the room watched her in silent admiration. Whispers began spreading again. But this time they were different. "Who is she? She's stunning. I've never seen her before. Wait, isn't that?" Lucio's heartbeat grew louder in his ears. Veronica stepped forward calmly, and beside her walked Adrian. Tall, confident, dressed in a perfectly tailored suit Adrian carried himself with the quiet authority of a man who did not need to prove his power to anyone. His presence alone shifted the energy of the room. People recognized him immediately. That's Adrian Laurent, the billionaire. What is he doing here? And who is that woman with him? Adrian walked beside Veronica not as someone showing her off, but as someone proud to stand next to her. Lucio felt something unfamiliar rising in his chest. Confusion, shock, and something dangerously close to regret. Veronica's eyes slowly scanned the room. She saw the same faces, the same people who once whispered about her body, the same people who laughed quietly during Lucio's cruel jokes. But tonight, no one was laughing. Their expressions had changed. Admiration, curiosity, envy. Veronica finally noticed Lucio standing among the crowd. For a moment, their eyes met. Lucio expected anger, pain, bitterness. Instead, Veronica simply looked at him calmly, as if he were just another guest in the room. The indifference hurt more than anger ever could. Lucio stepped forward slightly, unable to stop himself. Veronica! The name left his lips quietly. She stopped walking. Adrian glanced at Lucio briefly, then at Veronica. Someone you know? He asked gently. Veronica nodded calmly. Yes, someone from my past. Lucio stared at her in disbelief. The way she spoke felt distant, detached, as if the years they had spent together meant nothing. Veronica, he repeated, struggling to find words. You look. He couldn't finish the sentence, because every word felt too small. Beautiful, elegant, confident, radiant. All the qualities he once believed Veronica could never possess now stood directly in front of him. Veronica offered him a polite smile. Good evening, Lucio. The calmness of her voice made the moment even more surreal. Lucio's eyes moved briefly toward Adrian. And this is... Adrian extended his hand politely. Adrian Laurent. Lucio's expression stiffened. Of course he knew that name. Every businessman in the country did. Adrian Laurent was powerful, influential, untouchable. Lucio forced a handshake. A pleasure. But the words felt hollow. Veronica noticed the tension but remained composed. We should greet the host, Adrian said softly. Veronica nodded. As they walked past Lucio together, the entire ballroom watched them. But Lucio remained frozen in place. His mind struggled to process the impossible reality standing before him. 3 months ago, Veronica had left his life in humiliation. Tonight she had returned as the most captivating woman in the room. And the man standing beside her was someone Lucio could never compete with. Lucio slowly turned around, watching Veronica across the ballroom as she spoke gracefully with other guests. People admired her. People listened to her. People respected her. For the first time since that night 3 months ago, Lucio felt the painful weight of realization settling in his chest. The woman he once treated as an embarrassment had become someone the entire room admired. And the worst part was not her beauty, not her confidence, not even the powerful man standing beside her. The worst part was understanding something he had never realized before. Lucio had never truly seen Veronica, not until it was too late. The realization settled heavily in his chest as he stood motionless in the middle of the ballroom. Around him, the party continued with laughter, music, and polite conversations, but Lucio barely heard any of it. His eyes followed Veronica wherever she moved across the room. She no longer looked like the quiet woman who once stood nervously beside him. Now, she carried herself with calm confidence. Her posture was graceful, her smile genuine, her voice steady as she spoke with guests who admired her presence. People listened when she talked. They welcomed her into conversations as if she had always belonged among them. Lucio felt a strange tightness in his chest. 3 months. That was all it had taken for the woman he once mocked to become someone entirely different. Or perhaps, he realized with growing discomfort, She had always been that person. He had simply never bothered to see it. Across the ballroom, Veronica stood beside Adrian, speaking with the event's host. The city lights glittered through the large glass windows behind them, casting a warm glow across the elegant room. Adrian leaned slightly toward Veronica as she spoke, his attention completely focused on her words. There was something unmistakable in the way he looked at her. Respect, admiration, pride. It was the kind of attention Lucio had never given her. Lucio's fingers tightened around the glass in his hand. Nearby guests continued whispering. "Who is she? I heard she used to be married. Adrien Laurent rarely appears at social events like this. He must be serious about her." Lucio heard every word. Each whisper felt like another weight pressing down on his chest. Clara arrived a few minutes later, stepping gracefully into the ballroom in her glamorous red dress. She approached Lucio with her usual confident smile. "You started without me," she teased lightly. Lucio barely reacted. His attention remained fixed across the room. Clara followed his gaze and immediately noticed Veronica standing beside Adrian. Her smile faded slightly. "Who is that?" she asked. Lucio answered quietly. "My wife." Clara blinked. "Your wife?" Lucio corrected himself slowly. "My former wife." Clara studied Veronica again, her expression growing more complicated. "Well," she said after a moment, "she looks different." Lucio didn't respond, because different was far too small a word for the transformation he was witnessing. The music in the ballroom slowly shifted into a softer melody as the host stepped onto the small stage to thank guests for attending. Conversations gradually quieted. People gathered closer toward the center of the room. Lucio remained near the back, still watching Veronica. She stood calmly beside Adrian, unaware that Lucio's entire world felt like it was shifting beneath his feet. Then something unexpected happened. Adrian gently took Veronica's hand. At first, Veronica looked slightly surprised, but Adrian gave her a reassuring smile. "What are you doing?" she asked softly. "Something I should have done sooner," Adrian replied. Veronica's brow furrowed in curiosity. Before she could ask another question, Adrian stepped forward toward the center of the ballroom. The movement immediately caught people's attention. Guests turned their heads. Whispers spread quickly. "Is that Adrien Laurent? What's happening?" Adrian stopped beneath the warm glow of the chandelier lights. Veronica stood beside him, slightly confused but calm. Lucio's heart began beating faster. Something was about to happen. Something important. Adrian turned toward Veronica. For a brief moment, the entire ballroom seemed to hold its breath. Then Adrian slowly knelt down on one knee. Gasps erupted across the room. A small velvet box appeared in his hand. Lucio felt the air leave his lungs. The whispers turned into excited murmurs. "Is he proposing?" "No way!" "Right here!" Adrian opened the ring box, revealing a diamond that sparkled brilliantly beneath the lights. But Adrian's voice remained calm and sincere. "Veronica," he said gently. The entire room fell silent. Adrian continued, his eyes steady and warm. "The first day I met you, I saw someone who had been hurt by the world but still chose kindness. I saw strength where others might only see scars." Veronica's eyes softened. Adrian spoke with quiet certainty. "You didn't change just to impress anyone. You changed because you finally saw your own worth." Lucio felt every word like a blade twisting deeper into his chest. Adrian continued, "In these 3 months, you've shown me more courage and sincerity than most people show in a lifetime." He took a slow breath. "And I don't want to spend another day pretending that my life would be complete without you in it." The room remained completely silent. Even the musicians had stopped playing. Adrian lifted the ring slightly. "Veronica, will you marry me?" For a moment that felt like an eternity, no one moved. Veronica stared at Adrian, her eyes filled with emotion. Memories flashed through her mind. Lucio's insults, the laughter at the party, The lonely night she walked away from everything. The quiet mornings beside the ocean. The strength she had slowly rebuilt. And the man kneeling before her now. A man who never mocked her. Never compared her. Never made her feel small. Lucio stood frozen. His entire body felt heavy, as if gravity itself had suddenly grown stronger. He realized something in that moment that he had never allowed himself to understand before. Veronica had never been the problem. His cruelty had been. His arrogance. His blindness. And now the consequence of that blindness was unfolding right in front of him. Veronica slowly reached out her hand. Her voice was steady when she finally spoke. "Yes!" The word echoed across the silent room. For a split second, the ballroom remained completely still. Then applause erupted like thunder. Guests cheered. People smiled. Some even stood up to clap louder. Adrian gently slipped the ring onto Veronica's finger before rising to his feet. He pulled her into a warm embrace. The crowd admired them openly. They're perfect together. She deserves that happiness. What a beautiful moment. Lucio could barely hear any of it. His vision blurred slightly. Across the room, Veronica looked happier than he had ever seen her. Not because of the expensive ring. Not because of Adrian's wealth. But because she was finally standing in a place where she was respected. Where she was valued. Where she was loved. Lucio lowered his gaze slowly. For the first time in years, the confident businessman felt painfully small. He had once believed Veronica was lucky to have him. Now he understood the truth. He had been the lucky one, and he had destroyed it with his own hands. Across the ballroom, Veronica turned slightly, her eyes briefly meeting Lucio's once more. But this time, there was no sadness in her gaze. No bitterness. No anger. Only quiet peace. Lucio looked away, because the truth was finally impossible to ignore. The woman he once humiliated had become someone extraordinary, and the insults that once tried to break her had only made her stronger. Veronica had walked through humiliation and emerged radiant, unstoppable, and Lucio would spend the rest of his life remembering the woman he failed to see, until the world showed him what he had lost forever.